My name is Madison Clark. I'm 23 years old, and this is the story of how I saved my parents' home when my father lost everything. My father, Robert Clark, worked as a construction supervisor in Charlotte, North Carolina, for over 25 years. He wasn't wealthy, but he was the kind of man who always put his family first. My mother, Linda, worked part-time at a school cafeteria, and together they dreamed of owning a home. When I turned 18, they finally bought a beautiful two-story house. To afford it, my father took out a large mortgage. For 2 years, everything went perfectly. Every payment was made on time, and our home was filled with happiness. Then everything changed. One rainy morning, my father's company announced massive layoffs, and he came home carrying a cardboard box with all of his belongings. That night, I saw my father cry for the first time. He looked around the house and quietly said, "I don't know how I'm going to keep this home." Over the following months, he searched everywhere for work, but nothing paid enough to cover the mortgage. Soon, overdue notices from the bank started arriving, and representatives began visiting our house. One evening, I found my father sitting alone on the porch with tears in his eyes. "I've failed this family," he whispered. I sat beside him and held his hand. "No, Dad, you haven't failed anyone." That night, I made a promise to myself. No matter how hard I had to work, I would save our home. The next morning, I started applying for every job I could find. I sent applications to dozens of companies. Most ignored me, and the rest rejected me because I had little experience. Just when I was beginning to lose hope, I received an email from Sterling Technologies inviting me for an interview. As I walked into their office a few days later, I knew this wasn't just another interview. It was my family's last chance. I took a deep breath and walked into the office of Sterling Technologies. The building was modern, busy, and full of confident professionals. For a moment, I felt completely out of place. A few minutes later, the Director of Operations, Jennifer Adams, greeted me with a smile and led me into the interview room. She asked me about my education, my skills, and how I handled pressure. I answered every question honestly. Then she asked one final question. "Madison, why do you want this job?" I could have given the usual answer, but instead I told her the truth. My father lost his job. My parents are about to lose our home because they can't keep up with the mortgage. They spent their whole lives sacrificing for me. Now it's my turn to fight for them. For a few seconds, the room was completely silent. Jennifer looked at me and smiled. "Thank you for being honest." 3 days later, my phone rang. It was Sterling Technologies. "We're happy to offer you the position of project coordinator." My eyes filled with tears. The salary was more than I had ever expected. I accepted immediately. When I got home, my parents were waiting nervously. I smiled and said, "I got the job." My mother hugged me tightly. My father looked at me with tears in his eyes. "I've never been more proud of you." That night, we celebrated with a simple pizza dinner. It wasn't fancy, but for the first time in months, there was hope in our home again. My first day at work was challenging. Everything was new. I knew I had been given a rare opportunity, so I promised myself I wouldn't waste it. I arrived early every morning. I stayed late whenever extra work was needed. Instead of complaining, I kept learning. Slowly, my manager began trusting me with bigger responsibilities. A few months later, I received my first paycheck. I looked at the money in my account. For a moment, I thought about buying something for myself. A new phone, new clothes. But then I remembered my father sitting on the porch, believing he had failed us. Without hesitation, I transferred almost my entire paycheck toward the mortgage. That evening, I handed the payment receipt to my father. He looked at it in shock. "Madison, this is your money." I smiled. "No, Dad, it's our home." He tried to refuse, but I held his hand and said, "When I was little, you sacrificed everything for me. Now let me do the same for you." My father couldn't stop crying. He hugged me tighter than ever before. From that day on, every month, I made another mortgage payment. Sometimes I worked overtime. Sometimes I took on extra projects for bonuses. It wasn't easy, but little by little, the mortgage balance started getting smaller, and for the first time in a long time, the warning letters from the bank stopped coming. Our home finally began to feel like a home again. 2 years passed. By then, I was no longer the new employee at Sterling Technologies. I had become one of the company's most trusted project coordinators. Every project I completed taught me something new. Every success brought me one step closer to my dream. One Monday morning, my manager, Jennifer Adams, walked over to my desk. "Madison, the CEO wants to see you." My heart started racing. Had I done something wrong? A few minutes later, I walked into the CEO's office. William Carter stood up, shook my hand, and invited me to sit down. He smiled and said, "Madison, I've been reviewing the performance of our employees. Your name keeps coming up." He continued, "You've earned the trust of your team, our clients respect you, and your work has been outstanding." Then he said something that completely changed my life. "We're launching our biggest project of the year, and I want you to lead it." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Me?" He nodded. "This promotion comes with the position of senior project manager and a significant salary increase." I accepted without hesitation. The next year was the busiest of my life. Some days I worked 12 hours. Some weekends I barely had time to rest. Whenever I felt exhausted, I remembered my father's face on the day he thought we would lose our home. That memory kept me moving forward. Months later, the project was completed ahead of schedule. The client was so impressed that they signed another long-term contract with the company. At the annual company meeting, William Carter stood on stage and said, "This success wouldn't have been possible without Madison Clark." The entire room stood and applauded. A week later, my annual bonus was deposited into my account. I opened my banking app and stared at the balance. Then I checked the remaining mortgage. My heart skipped a beat. Between my savings, my bonus, and everything I had already paid, I finally had enough money to pay off the entire mortgage. I couldn't stop smiling. I whispered to myself, "Dad, we did it." The very next morning, I picked up a cashier's check and drove straight to Horizon Bank. I was about to end the chapter that had caused my family years of pain. The moment I walked into Horizon Bank, I felt years of fear slowly disappearing. I walked up to the counter and smiled. "I'd like to pay off my family's mortgage." The bank representative looked surprised. "Completely?" "Yes." She verified the account and disappeared for a few minutes. When she returned, she smiled warmly. "Congratulations, Miss Clark. After today's payment, your mortgage balance is officially zero." She handed me the final documents. Across the top were the words I had dreamed of seeing for years: "Paid in full." I held the papers tightly, trying not to cry. Then I drove straight to my parents' house. When my mother opened the door, she smiled. "Madison!" What a surprise! My father was sitting in the living room reading a newspaper. He looked up and asked, "What brings you here, sweetheart?" Without saying a word, I placed a large envelope on the coffee table. "Dad, I have something for you." He slowly opened it. At first he looked confused, then his eyes stopped on the words, "Paid in full." His hands began to shake. He looked at me with tears in his eyes. "Madison, is this real?" I smiled through my tears. "Yes, Dad. The mortgage is gone. This house is finally ours." For a few seconds, nobody spoke. Then my father broke down crying. He hugged me tighter than he ever had before. "I don't know how to thank you." I hugged him back. "You already have. You spent your whole life believing in me. This is simply my way of believing in you." My mother joined us, and the three of us stood there crying and smiling at the same time. That evening, we sat together on the front porch, the same porch where I had once found my father feeling defeated. This time, he looked at the sunset with a smile on his face. He turned toward me and quietly said, "You know, Madison, I used to think the greatest thing I ever built was this house." He paused, tears filling his eyes. But I was wrong. The greatest thing I ever built was raising a daughter like you. Those words meant more to me than every promotion, every paycheck, and every award I had ever received. For the first time in years, our home was no longer filled with fear. It was filled with peace. A few weeks later, I invited my parents to their favorite restaurant. For the first time in years, my father looked completely different. He was smiling, laughing. The stress that had weighed on him for so long was finally gone. Halfway through dinner, he reached into his jacket pocket and handed me a small envelope. "Open it," he said. Inside was a handwritten letter. I recognized his handwriting immediately. It said, "Dear Madison, there was a time when I truly believed I had failed as a father. When I couldn't make the mortgage payments, I felt like I had destroyed our family's future. But you never blamed me. You stood beside me when I couldn't stand on my own. You worked harder than anyone should have to at your age, not because you had to, but because you loved us. A house can be rebuilt. Money can be earned again. But a daughter with a heart like yours is something money could never buy. Thank you for giving me my smile back. Love, Dad. By the time I finished reading, tears were streaming down my face. I stood up and hugged him. Dad, you never failed us. You taught me what real strength looks like. Months passed. Life finally returned to normal. I continued working at Sterling Technologies and was promoted again. But no promotion ever meant as much as seeing the lights on in my parents' home every evening. Because I knew one thing: no bank representative would ever knock on that door again. No foreclosure notice would ever arrive. That house belonged to my parents. Forever. People often ask me, what was your revenge? The truth is, I never wanted revenge against a person. My revenge was against fear, against hopelessness, against every moment that made my father believe he wasn't good enough. The greatest victory wasn't becoming successful. It was watching my father smile again. If you're going through a difficult time right now, don't give up. Jobs can be lost, money can disappear, life can change overnight, but as long as your family stands together, hope is never truly gone. My name is Madison Clark. At 23 years old, I made one promise: I would save my parents' home. It wasn't easy. There were sacrifices, long nights, moments when I wanted to quit, but I kept moving forward. And one day, I walked into a bank, paid off every last dollar of our mortgage, and gave my father the 3 words he thought he would never see again: paid in full. That wasn't just the happiest day of his life. It was the happiest day of mine.